What if I told you that the story we think we know about Meghan Markle and the royal family is only the tip of a much darker, more complicated iceberg? That behind the headlines, behind the glossy photos and public smiles, a storm was brewing that not even the most seasoned palace insiders could fully contain? Imagine sitting in Buckingham Palace, one of the most scrutinized families in the world, and suddenly discovering that someone you trusted, someone you had welcomed into your family, had been quietly accusing your loved ones of sabotage, betrayal, and intentional harm. No proof, just allegations. And yet, these allegations carried weight, power, and potential consequences that could ripple across the entire monarchy. That someone was Meghan Markle. And the person confronting this storm was none other than Prince William, the future king, the man tasked with preserving both his family's reputation and its inner peace. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all begins with a conversation, one that was meant to remain private, yet somehow set the stage for one of the most explosive royal revelations in recent history. Picture this: a room in one of the palace wings, heavy curtains blocking out the light, the soft tick of an antique clock echoing in the silence. William sits, tension written across his face. Across from him, Meghan speaks. Every word carefully chosen, every pause weighted with implication. She accuses the senior members of the royal family, those who have dedicated their lives to the monarchy, of deliberately sabotaging her, of undermining her career, her public image, her sense of belonging. And she does it with a certainty that makes it impossible to ignore. But here's the catch: she has no evidence, no documents, no recordings, no witnesses, just her word. And in a world as meticulous and scrutinized as the royal family, a claim without proof is both dangerous and destabilizing. Think about it for a second. How would you react if someone accused your parents, your siblings, or your closest friends of betrayal without showing a single piece of proof? Would you defend them? Would you confront the accuser? Or would you question your own reality, wondering if perhaps there was a hidden truth you were blind to? That was William's dilemma. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Meghan's words, whispered in private, had the potential to ignite public controversy the moment they leaked. And leaks, in the royal world, are inevitable. Every gesture, every comment, every move is under surveillance by aides, the press, and increasingly, the digital world. One misinterpreted glance or offhand remark could explode into a full-blown scandal. For William, the challenge wasn't just managing the allegations themselves. It was about controlling a narrative that could spiral out of control, affecting millions of people who followed the monarchy's every move. Now, some might ask, why does this matter? Why does the drama of one family, however royal, hold the world's attention? Because this isn't just about palace gossip. This is about power, legacy, and trust. It's about what happens when personal grievances collide with centuries of tradition and public expectation. And most importantly, it's about what happens when accusations, whether true or false, threaten to unravel not just relationships, but reputations that took decades to build. Imagine the pressure William must have felt. On one side, the public eye, demanding transparency, judgment, and accountability. On the other, the private chambers of his family, where loyalty and trust are sacred yet fragile. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, or didn't speak, carried enormous weight. And in this tension, the palace corridors grew heavy with speculation. A casual observer might see calm composure and elegant ceremonies, but beneath that polish, a storm was brewing. Meanwhile, Meghan's accusations weren't vague or casual. They were pointed, precise, and delivered with the kind of conviction that makes people question their own judgment. She claimed that senior royals were actively working against her, sabotaging events, undermining her influence, and even manipulating public perception to diminish her. To the average outsider, these might sound like the complaints of someone frustrated or misunderstood. But in the context of the palace, where every move is scrutinized and tradition runs deep, these words were explosive. They were a challenge to the very hierarchy and structure of the royal family. And yet, William's response, according to sources, was measured, deliberate, and precise. He didn't lash out publicly, and he didn't dismiss the claims outright. Instead, He confronted the problem in a way only someone in his position could, by observing, collecting information, and weighing every piece of the puzzle carefully. His goal wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. He needed to understand whether these allegations were the result of misunderstandings, miscommunication, or something far more calculated. Here's where it gets even more intriguing. Because while Meghan's claims were private, the ripple effects of such allegations are never contained. Palace staff noticed tension, advisors whispered warnings, and even casual conversations began to carry extra weight. It's like dropping a single pebble into a massive pond. The ripples reach far beyond the point of impact. And in the royal family, these ripples can affect public perception, media narratives, and even international relations. William, aware of this, had to navigate these waters with extreme caution. Let's pause for a moment and consider the emotional dimension. Imagine being accused of sabotage by someone you welcomed into your family. Imagine feeling a mix of disbelief, hurt, and responsibility. How do you maintain your composure while privately grappling with the implications? William reportedly felt torn, not just because of public scrutiny, but because of the private betrayal that can't easily be shared with the world. These are the intimate pressures that never make it into tabloids, the kind of stress that shapes decisions, reactions, and ultimately, legacies. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Meghan's rise within the public eye had been meteoric. Her every move was analyzed, praised, or criticized in headlines around the globe. Accusations like these, even if unproven, were like gasoline near an open flame. For William, the risk wasn't merely personal, it was institutional. The monarchy, steeped in centuries of tradition, has always relied on cohesion, unity, and careful management of public perception. Allegations of sabotage, if left unchecked, threatened that delicate balance. But let's not oversimplify the story. This isn't just about Meghan accusing the royals or William defending them. It's about the human emotions that swirl beneath the gilded surface: frustration, fear, disappointment, and even love. Because despite the tension, family bonds still existed, and William, as both brother and future king, had to navigate this web of relationships with tact, empathy, and strategic insight. Every decision he made would have consequences, not just for the present, but for decades to come. And here's the part that most people don't see. The private conversations that William reportedly had following Meghan's accusations were filled with nuance. He didn't simply reject her claims outright. He asked questions, sought clarification, and weighed the motives behind the words. There was a delicate balance between listening and defending, between understanding and challenging. It's a level of emotional intelligence few of us can imagine, and yet it's critical when the stakes are this high. By now, you might be asking yourself, what exactly did William reveal? How did these private accusations translate into public knowledge? And more importantly, how did they shape the relationship between Meghan, Harry, William, and the rest of the royal family? These are questions that have haunted palace insiders, biographers, and royal watchers alike. And while we will explore the full story in the chapters ahead, it's important to recognize the scale of what we're dealing with. This isn't just gossip. This is a case study in power, perception, and the fragile dynamics of trust. So, let me ask you directly, what would you do if someone in your family accused your loved ones of sabotage without a shred of evidence, yet with the certainty that their words could destroy reputations? Would you confront them? Ignore them? Or try to mediate a situation that seems almost impossible to resolve? Prince William faced this exact dilemma, and his choices would set in motion a series of events that the world is still grappling with today. And yet, even as tension rose behind closed doors, Meghan's accusations were only the beginning. Because once William decided to address them, the ripple effects spread far beyond the palace walls. Media outlets caught wind, social media erupted, and public speculation reached unprecedented levels. Every word spoken, every expression captured, every interview given, became a piece of the puzzle. And William, aware of this, had to strategize not just for his family, but for the monarchy itself. It started with a conversation that most people would never hear about. A private, closed-door discussion that, if it ever became public, could shake the very foundations of the royal family. Imagine sitting across from someone you trusted, someone who you believed had joined your family with the best of intentions, only to have them quietly, yet firmly, accuse the people you love the most of actively working against them. That someone was Meghan Markle, and the person listening, calculating every word and weighing every implication, was Prince William. The scene itself was tense, almost cinematic. A room in one of the palace wings, adorned with centuries of history, heavy curtains keeping the outside world at bay. The only sounds were the quiet shuffle of papers, the subtle creak of floorboards, and the faint tick of an antique clock. It was a room that had seen countless negotiations, private conversations, and the unfolding of royal drama over generations. But even it seemed to recognize the gravity of what was happening now. Meghan spoke with precision. Her accusations were not vague. They were pointed, specific, and delivered with a confidence that made it impossible to ignore. She claimed that senior members of the royal family were deliberately sabotaging her, that events she had planned, initiatives she had proposed, and appearances she had meticulously prepared for were being undermined behind the scenes. Every word carried weight, every pause implied strategy, and every claim seemed calculated to elicit a reaction. William's response, however, was not immediate. The man known for his calm public demeanor was internally calculating, measuring the gravity of each allegation. How do you respond when someone accuses your parents, your siblings, and your family of betrayal without providing evidence? How do you navigate accusations that could not only affect personal relationships, but also the public perception of an entire institution? This was William's dilemma, and the pressure was immense. The royal family operates under strict rules of protocol and discretion. Every member is trained to maintain composure under scrutiny, to communicate with caution, and to protect the monarchy's image at all costs. Yet, even within these constraints, the allegations were explosive. In a family where appearances matter as much as truth, the mere suggestion of internal sabotage is enough to ignite a crisis. And the fact that these accusations came without proof made them even more dangerous. A claim without evidence can be easily dismissed, or it can fester, leading to doubt, mistrust, and internal strife. For William, this was not just a matter of managing his sister-in-law's grievances. It was about protecting the integrity of the institution and the well-being of those he loved. The palace, after all, is more than a residence. It is a symbol of continuity, duty, and the very idea of monarchy. Allegations like these, if they gain traction, could erode public confidence and destabilize the carefully maintained hierarchy within the family. And yet, there was more at stake than protocol. There was the human element, the personal impact of being accused by someone you welcomed into your family. William reportedly felt a mixture of disbelief, hurt, and a duty to remain composed. These emotions are rarely discussed in public, but they are critical to understanding the full scope of the situation. It is one thing to face criticism from outsiders. It is another entirely to confront accusations from someone within your trusted circle. What made the situation even more precarious was timing. Meghan's public profile was at its peak, and her every action was scrutinized by millions around the globe. Her statements, no matter how private, had the potential to leak, and leaks in the royal family are almost inevitable. One whispered allegation could easily turn into a headline, amplified by the media frenzy that follows any controversy involving the monarchy. The stakes could not have been higher, and William knew that any misstep could have lasting consequences. The palace staff, ever observant, noticed the subtle shifts in energy. Advisors whispered among themselves, noting tension where there had previously been none. Courtiers and aides, accustomed to maintaining discretion, sensed that a storm was brewing. Every glance, every hushed conversation, became a potential flashpoint. The ripple effects of Meghan's accusations began almost immediately, extending far beyond the private room where they were made. It wasn't just the content of the allegations that was explosive. It was the certainty with which they were delivered. Meghan did not speak in hypotheticals or vague frustrations. She spoke with conviction, asserting that the actions of senior royals were not coincidental, but deliberate. This level of certainty can be intoxicating and persuasive, even when no proof exists. It can make listeners question their own perceptions, wonder if they have missed something, and begin to doubt the motives of those closest to them. William, however, approached the situation with caution. He didn't dismiss her claims outright, nor did he react emotionally. He observed, he questioned, and he gathered information, precisely because he understood the potential consequences of reacting impulsively. Here is where the human drama intertwines with institutional pressure. William's private contemplation of Meghan's accusations is not just a story about family conflict. It is about the burden of leadership, the weight of legacy, and the necessity of discernment. Every decision he made, every response he considered, had repercussions that could extend decades into the future. Would ignoring the allegations be perceived as complicity? Would confronting them publicly escalate the conflict? The calculus was complex, and the stakes were personal, political, and deeply emotional. The impact of these accusations did not remain contained within the walls of the palace. Word, even in partial or distorted form, has a way of traveling quickly. Media outlets caught wind of tension, social media speculated endlessly, and public opinion became a third, invisible participant in the unfolding drama. Suddenly, William was not just managing a private family dispute. He was navigating a global stage where every action, every silence, and every facial expression could be interpreted, misinterpreted, and broadcast to millions. Adding another layer to the complexity was the emotional toll on William himself. Being accused of inaction or complicity in sabotage is painful, especially when it involves people you care about. He reportedly wrestled with conflicting impulses. To defend his family, to confront the accuser, to seek truth, and to maintain composure under extraordinary pressure. These are private struggles that rarely make it into public view, but they are essential to understanding why the story became so volatile. Meghan's accusations were specific, targeting the integrity of senior royals and their intentions. She claimed interference in events, manipulation of public perception, and deliberate undermining of her initiatives. To a casual observer, these claims might seem like the frustrations of someone struggling to fit into a complex environment. But in a palace structured around centuries of tradition, where every move is calculated and every action scrutinized, such claims are not easily dismissed. They strike at the heart of loyalty, trust, and the delicate balance of power. William's methodical approach reportedly involved listening, questioning, and observing without immediate judgment. He considered the potential motivations behind the accusations, the context in which they were made, and the evidence, or lack thereof, supporting them. This careful deliberation reflects the dual role he occupies, both as a family member and as the future custodian of the monarchy's public image. Every decision carries consequences for both personal relationships and institutional stability. And yet, even with this careful approach, the situation was volatile. Every interaction between Meghan and the senior royals became a potential flashpoint. Staff, advisors, and even casual visitors to the palace sensed the tension, though few understood its origin or severity. The very act of speaking, or remaining silent, took on heightened significance, as the ramifications of each word could ripple through both the family and the public domain. By now, you might be wondering, what exactly were the consequences of these accusations? How did William navigate the impossible balance between private family loyalty and public responsibility? And most importantly, what steps did he take to ensure that the truth, or his version of it, would ultimately prevail? These are questions that will unfold over the chapters ahead, as the story delves into the intricate, often hidden world of palace politics, personal grievances, and the human emotions that drive them. The initial conversation was only the beginning. From that moment on, the dynamics within the palace shifted. Relationships were tested, trust was questioned, and the veneer of public composure hid a private struggle of monumental proportions. Every subsequent interaction, every private discussion, every leaked detail added layers of complexity to an already fraught situation. The accusations had set the stage for a confrontation that would ripple across the monarchy, the media, and the world at large. And here is the question that lingers. If someone accuses your family of sabotage without proof, how do you respond? Do you confront them, defend your loved ones, or attempt to mediate a resolution that might seem impossible? William faced this dilemma in real time, and the choices he made would set in motion events that no one could have anticipated. What do you do when someone you trusted accuses your family of sabotage, without evidence, but with such conviction that it shakes the very foundation of your world? For Prince William, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was reality. The allegations Meghan Markle reportedly made against senior royals had landed on his shoulders, and he had to respond. Not publicly, not in interviews, not with dramatic statements that would make headlines the next day, but in private, where every word, every pause, every reaction would ripple through family dynamics and palace walls alike. William's private response, according to insiders, was marked by a calm precision that belied the storm he was navigating inside. On the surface, he maintained the composure that had made him a figure of stability and leadership within the royal family. But beneath that exterior, a whirlwind of emotions swirled: disbelief, frustration, protective instinct, and the heavy weight of responsibility. He knew that any rash reaction could exacerbate the situation, not resolve it. Imagine being in his position. Someone you welcomed into your family suddenly casts shadows over your parents, your siblings, and the entire system that you represent. How do you process that? Do you confront them head-on? Do you silently investigate the claims? Or do you attempt to mediate, hoping to preserve relationships while simultaneously protecting reputations? For William, the answer was nuanced. He could not simply dismiss the accusations, but he also could not validate them without scrutiny. Every step required careful thought. Every response required emotional control. In the days following Meghan's private claims, William reportedly engaged in a series of measured actions. He listened. He asked pointed questions. He sought context, trying to understand the motives behind the accusations. Were they the result of genuine misunderstandings? Miscommunications amplified by stress and media attention? Or was there a deeper, more strategic purpose behind them? His approach was methodical, almost surgical, because he understood that a misstep could create consequences far beyond his personal relationships. What makes this situation particularly fascinating is the tension between public persona and private reality. The royal family is, after all, a public institution as much as a family. Every member has a role, a script, and expectations to uphold. William's calm public image was critical in projecting stability to the world. But in private, he was navigating chaos, a storm that no amount of public appearances, smiling photos, or controlled interviews could fully contain. It was the classic dichotomy of leadership, appearing composed while managing inner turmoil that few could imagine. Adding to the complexity was the fact that Meghan's accusations were specific. They weren't vague grievances about feeling misunderstood or out of place. She reportedly alleged deliberate sabotage, missed opportunities, undermined initiatives, public misrepresentations. Each claim, if true, could damage reputations, strain relationships, and influence public perception. And each claim, crucially, came with no tangible proof. This placed William in a delicate position. He had to balance skepticism with empathy, analysis with instinct, and caution with decisive action. One of the strategies reportedly employed by William was to gather information discreetly. Staff, aides, and advisors often become the silent witnesses to palace drama, noting inconsistencies, observing behavior, and reporting concerns up the chain of command. William is said to have relied heavily on these observations, combining first-hand accounts with his own judgment to form a clearer picture. Every interaction became data. Every statement became a piece of a larger puzzle. And yet, even with all this information, uncertainty remained. Uncertainty that can erode confidence and heighten tension in ways that are almost impossible to control. Imagine, for a moment, the emotional intensity of this process. Here is a man weighing the validity of accusations that touch both his family and the future of the monarchy. He must navigate questions of loyalty, fairness, and truth while ensuring that his responses do not inflame tensions or lead to irreversible consequences. It's a pressure few of us can relate to, and it's a reminder that leadership, especially in high-stakes environments, is rarely about quick decisions. It's about patience, discernment, and sometimes restraint. The psychological impact on William was reportedly significant. Being accused by someone within your circle, someone who is supposed to be a partner, a family member, or a close ally, creates a cognitive and emotional burden. It forces you to question motives, reassess relationships, and anticipate outcomes that are anything but predictable. The human element, the feelings of betrayal, disappointment, and the desire to protect loved ones, intersects with institutional obligations, creating a high-pressure environment where every choice has consequences. At the same time, William had to maintain a front of normalcy. Public duties, appearances, and the constant scrutiny of the media required him to appear unshaken, composed, and confident. He could not allow the private drama to bleed into his public persona. This duality, calm versus chaos, was perhaps the defining feature of his response. It is a tension familiar to anyone who has ever had to manage personal conflict under the watchful eyes of others, amplified to an extraordinary degree by the fact that the entire world was watching. Another layer of complexity was the reaction of Harry, Meghan's husband, who was himself caught between loyalty to his wife and the realities of palace life. William reportedly had to navigate not just Meghan's accusations, but the ripple effects on his brother's behavior, his sense of loyalty, and the potential for public fallout. Family dynamics in high-pressure environments are never simple, and when accusations of sabotage enter the mix, the emotional stakes rise exponentially. One particularly fascinating aspect of William's response is how he reportedly sought to understand the underlying reasons behind Meghan's claims. Was it frustration at the constraints of royal life? Was it a miscommunication that had escalated beyond repair? Or was there a strategic dimension, an attempt to assert influence or control over a situation that had always been structured by centuries of tradition? By approaching the problem analytically, William could assess not just the content of the accusations, but the intent and possible motivations behind them, a perspective critical for anyone managing high-stakes interpersonal conflict. Meanwhile, the palace staff, ever observant, noticed subtle changes in behavior. Advisors whispered to each other about increased tension, staff members sensed unease where previously there had been calm, and even minor interactions became fraught with meaning. Every gesture, every glance, every pause carried significance. In such an environment, the psychological and emotional load on someone like William is immense. He had to manage not only the accusations themselves, but also the atmosphere they created among the people who keep the palace functioning. It is also reported that William, despite his calm exterior, experienced moments of personal frustration and emotional strain. Even the most disciplined leaders are human, and private accusations, especially those made without evidence, can create internal conflict. He reportedly struggled with balancing empathy for Meghan's feelings with the need to protect the integrity of his family. How do you respond to someone who feels wronged, while also defending the people they are accusing? This is a question that cuts to the heart of leadership, morality, and emotional intelligence. As the days and weeks progressed, the tension escalated. Conversations became more careful, interactions more measured. William reportedly worked to maintain communication channels that were open yet controlled, ensuring that dialogue continued without allowing conflict to spiral out of control. Every word had to be weighed, every response calibrated, every move deliberate. It is a level of strategic thinking that few of us ever experience, but one that is essential in high-stakes family and institutional dynamics. And yet, even with all this careful maneuvering, the situation was unpredictable. Meghan's accusations, though private, had the potential to leak. Media outlets were alert, social media was ready to amplify any sign of discord, and the public's appetite for scandal was insatiable. William's challenge, therefore, was not just managing a private family conflict. It was controlling a narrative that could explode at any moment, impacting not just relationships, but public perception and institutional stability. The duality of calm versus chaos is perhaps best understood through the emotional tension William reportedly experienced. Outwardly, he maintained poise, diplomacy, and composure. Inwardly, he navigated a labyrinth of emotions: doubt, frustration, anger, empathy, and the responsibility to act decisively yet wisely. It is a psychological tightrope walk, where a misstep could have long-term ramifications for family dynamics, public reputation, and even the future of the monarchy. So let's pause and ask, what would you do in William's position? How do you respond to accusations that, if true, could harm your family and your legacy? but if false, could still create irreparable tension. How do you navigate the line between listening with empathy and protecting the people you love? These are questions few of us face, and yet they define the gravity of William's private response. And just when it seemed that careful observation and strategic thinking might be enough, the situation took another unexpected turn. A misinterpreted comment, a subtle leak, a quiet misunderstanding among staff, it all threatened to push the conflict from private tension into public controversy. The calm that William sought to maintain was suddenly under threat, and the chaos that had been simmering beneath the surface was poised to erupt. Imagine this: a private accusation, spoken in a quiet palace room, meant to remain between family members, suddenly breaking through the walls and echoing around the world. That is the power and danger of Meghan Markle's claims. For Prince William, the private storm he had been managing was about to collide head-on with a global media firestorm, one that would test his patience, his judgment, and the resilience of the monarchy itself. The moment the palace learned that whispers of Meghan's accusations were making their way into public discourse, tension spiked. Royal correspondents, always hungry for scoops, pounced on subtle hints. A carefully phrased comment in an interview, a body language cue captured in a photograph, a minor leak from an insider. Each fragment of information, taken out of context, became fodder for headlines. In hours, what was once a private grievance became front-page news. The media storm wasn't just about facts, it was about perception. Headlines ranged from royal rift exposed to Meghan versus the palace, the untold story. Social media exploded, with threads analyzing every gesture, every smile, every interview. Conspiracy theories emerged. Some claimed Meghan was being unfairly treated, others insisted she was manipulating the narrative. The public, starved for drama, dissected every detail, often with little regard for accuracy. And in this digital age, every rumor spread faster than any palace statement could contain it. William, according to insiders, watched this unfold with a mix of frustration and strategic calculation. On one hand, he understood that controlling a narrative in today's media environment is nearly impossible. On the other, he knew that every public misstep could magnify Meghan's claims, making them appear more credible than they were. The challenge was monumental. How do you defend your family's integrity without giving fuel to the media fire? How do you respond when every action is scrutinized, every word dissected, and every silence interpreted as a statement? The palace, typically adept at handling leaks and public relations, was suddenly navigating uncharted waters. Meghan's allegations, though private, had tapped into global fascination with the royal family and amplified long-standing narratives about internal discord. Journalists dissected past events, interviews, and statements, seeking connections that could confirm or deny the accusations. Rumors about tensions between Meghan and senior royals gained traction. Every minor incident, an awkward handshake, a tense photo, a curt statement, was interpreted as evidence of sabotage. At the same time, social media became a double-edged sword. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram amplified opinions, speculation, and fan theories. Memes, threads, and viral clips created a feedback loop, reinforcing the idea of a palace in turmoil. Public perception began to diverge from reality. The palace may have been managing things carefully behind the scenes, but online, the story took on a life of its own. Millions of people were forming opinions about Meghan, William, Harry, and the senior royals, often based on incomplete information. William reportedly faced an unprecedented balancing act. He had to maintain calm in private, reassure family members, manage staff anxiety, and anticipate media reactions, all while knowing that the world was watching, analyzing, and judging. Every public appearance became a test. How he interacted with Harry, Meghan, and other royals was scrutinized frame by frame. Every word he spoke, every expression he made, was interpreted as a coded message. The stakes were extraordinary. Compounding the pressure was the emotional weight of seeing private matters distorted in public. Allegations meant to be addressed within the family were now headlines. Misunderstandings became viral stories. Innocent gestures were recast as evidence of conflict. For William, who had spent years learning to navigate both public and private spheres. This was an entirely new level of scrutiny, one that tested not just his composure, but the monarchy's ability to withstand narrative attacks. Yet the media firestorm did more than create public pressure. It forced private decisions. William reportedly had to decide which information to share, which conversations to initiate, and which strategies to employ to mitigate further damage. This included delicate negotiations with advisors, communications teams, and trusted insiders, all while maintaining discretion. Every choice carried the risk of escalating the situation. Interestingly, the firestorm also revealed the paradox of royal life. The more you try to control the narrative, the more the story takes on a life of its own. Attempts to clarify or deny can be twisted into admissions or proof of wrongdoing. Silence can be interpreted as guilt, and every public reaction, even carefully measured ones, becomes part of the story. William, seasoned in public life, understood this. He knew that patience, strategy, and timing were crucial, even as the firestorm raged around him. The firestorm also had emotional consequences. Staff reported heightened anxiety, palace corridors buzzed with tension, and family members experienced increased stress. What was once a controlled environment of tradition and protocol became a pressure cooker of speculation, rumor, and conflicting loyalties. In this climate, trust became fragile, communication delicate, and every decision amplified. Amid this chaos, Meghan's role was magnified. Her previous interviews, public appearances, and charitable initiatives were reinterpreted through the lens of her allegations. Supporters praised her for speaking truth to power, while critics accused her of manipulation. Each narrative collided with the other, creating a polarized environment where facts were entangled with emotions and perceptions. For William, this meant that private management of the situation was intertwined with public perception in a way that demanded constant vigilance. Insiders also suggest that the media firestorm indirectly impacted Harry. As Meghan's husband and William's brother, he became a focal point of speculation. Observers debated his loyalty, his alignment, and his role in the unfolding drama. William, navigating these dynamics, reportedly had to balance familial concern with institutional responsibility. How do you maintain a relationship with your brother while managing a crisis that threatens both family cohesion and public trust? The firestorm had another unexpected effect. It forced the palace to reconsider its own communication strategy. Traditional protocols, which often relied on careful, measured statements, were inadequate in the face of rapid social media cycles and 24-hour news coverage. Every move required precise timing, phrasing, and coordination. William's role in these discussions reportedly grew as he provided input on both strategy and substance, seeking to minimize misinterpretation while protecting his family's integrity. And yet, despite all the strategic maneuvering, the firestorm had a human dimension that could not be ignored. The stress, pressure, and emotional burden on William reportedly grew heavier by the day. Even as he maintained his public composure, privately he navigated frustration, disappointment, and the emotional complexity of confronting claims made without proof. Balancing empathy for Meghan's feelings with defense of his family required constant emotional labor. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this media firestorm is how quickly private tensions can become public spectacle. A conversation meant to remain confidential became a global discussion. Every action, every statement, every pause was scrutinized. The palace, accustomed to managing scrutiny with grace, now faced a relentless barrage of interpretation, speculation, and judgment. William's challenge was to navigate this torrent while maintaining both family loyalty and institutional stability. The tension between private response and public perception defined William's approach during this period. He understood that even the most measured internal strategy could be undermined by public speculation. Yet he also recognized that rushing a response could be disastrous. The calculus was delicate. Every decision had immediate and long-term consequences, and missteps could not only exacerbate the situation but also damage the reputation of the monarchy. So, imagine the stakes. One private accusation, magnified by global media, creating a perfect storm of speculation, emotional strain, and institutional risk. Every headline, Every social media post, every opinion piece became part of the crisis, forcing William to act with foresight, patience, and extraordinary discretion. And just when it seemed that the firestorm was the only challenge, another layer emerged. One that would further complicate the palace's efforts to manage the situation and test William's leadership in ways no one could have predicted. What if someone accused your family of deliberately undermining you, intentionally sabotaging your life and reputation, without a shred of evidence? That is exactly what Meghan Markle reportedly alleged, and it sent shockwaves through the royal household. For Prince William, these claims were more than shocking. They were dangerous, both personally and institutionally. Understanding the nature, scope, and implications of these sabotage allegations is critical to grasping the full drama that unfolded behind palace doors. The first thing to note is the specificity of Meghan's claims. These were not vague complaints about feeling misunderstood or overlooked. According to insiders, she alleged deliberate actions taken by senior royals to diminish her influence, manipulate public perception, and obstruct her initiatives. This allegedly included the careful timing of announcements, selective media access, and even subtle gestures or omissions designed to portray her unfavorably. Every allegation carried weight because it implied intentionality. A belief that actions previously seen as neutral or procedural were part of a coordinated effort to undermine her. To the average observer, these accusations may seem extreme, even improbable. After all, we're talking about a family accustomed to managing public scrutiny, with generations of protocol guiding behavior. Why would senior royals risk scandal or public fallout to target one member privately? But that's the thing. Perception can be as powerful as reality. In Meghan's view, small actions, overlooked gestures, or bureaucratic delays may have appeared intentional, interpreted as sabotage in the high-pressure, high-stakes environment of the palace. And perception, once amplified, becomes reality, not just for those involved, but for the public and the media. Consider, for a moment, how this plays out in practice. Meghan reportedly believed that certain events she planned were intentionally undermined. A charitable initiative delayed without explanation, a photo opportunity arranged inconveniently, or a media appearance subtly sidelined could all be seen as evidence of a broader plot. To William, who had to sift through both fact and perception, the challenge was immense. Was this truly sabotage, or a series of misunderstandings and miscommunications amplified by stress, scrutiny, and palace bureaucracy? Distinguishing intent from circumstance is notoriously difficult, especially in an environment where every move is watched, documented, and analyzed. The sabotage narrative had consequences beyond personal relationships. By claiming deliberate interference, Meghan implicitly questioned the integrity of senior royals, the very people responsible for maintaining the monarchy's cohesion, public image, and global influence. This is not just about hurt feelings. This is about reputation, trust, and power. For William, managing this narrative was crucial. Allowing unverified claims to fester could erode public confidence and destabilize the institution, while dismissing them outright risked appearing dismissive or unsympathetic. And then there's the timing. These allegations reportedly coincided with some of Meghan's most high-profile appearances and initiatives. It created a perfect storm. Every delay, every misstep, every minor controversy could be interpreted through the lens of sabotage. Public perception quickly began to shift. Supporters of Meghan claimed she was being unfairly treated. Critics suggested she was manufacturing conflict. The palace, meanwhile, faced the near-impossible task of defending both its members and its reputation in real time. One particular point of contention reportedly involved public events. Meghan allegedly claimed that senior royals had deliberately assigned her low-profile roles or manipulated media coverage to portray her unfavorably. Imagine preparing for a major public initiative, only to feel that every detail is being undermined by unseen forces. The frustration, isolation, and sense of betrayal can be overwhelming. And according to insiders, this sense of being sabotaged fueled Meghan's private accusations. But there's a crucial distinction to understand. Intent versus outcome. Not every mistake or mishap is a deliberate act of sabotage. In a family and institution as complex as the royal family, delays, misunderstandings, and miscommunications are inevitable. Yet Meghan reportedly perceived them as intentional. For William, the challenge was reconciling these perceptions with reality, acknowledging her feelings while discerning the truth behind her claims. This requires not just emotional intelligence, but a strategic understanding of both human behavior and institutional dynamics. Another layer of the alleged sabotage claims involved media strategy. Meghan reportedly felt that her image had been manipulated to generate negative coverage, from misreported interviews to selective photo releases. To her, these actions were part of a broader effort to undermine her credibility and diminish her influence. William, observing the situation, reportedly analyzed patterns, sought corroborating evidence, and evaluated whether these were deliberate manipulations or the byproduct of routine media management. It's a fine line, and navigating it requires skill, patience, and insight. Family dynamics added further complexity. Harry, Meghan's husband, was reportedly caught in the middle, balancing loyalty to his wife with the pressures of his family and the monarchy. Staff and advisors were also affected, unsure how to interpret and respond to accusations of sabotage. The private tensions created an environment where even minor interactions carried the potential for conflict. William had to act as both mediator and protector, ensuring that relationships were maintained while the integrity of the institution remained intact. The psychological and emotional toll on William cannot be overstated. Accusations of sabotage strike at the heart of trust. To be accused of deliberately undermining someone you care about is painful. To navigate those accusations in the context of public scrutiny adds another layer of stress. Insiders report that William experienced a complex mix of frustration, determination, and protective instinct, carefully balancing empathy for Meghan's feelings with his duty to defend the family's reputation. Public perception further complicated matters. The sabotage narrative, once leaked or inferred, became a point of debate among royal commentators, journalists, and the public. Each misinterpreted gesture, each edited clip, each partial interview added fuel to the fire. Social media, in particular, amplified speculation, creating echo chambers where perception often outweighed verified fact. William's private efforts to understand and manage the situation were now juxtaposed against a public landscape that demanded immediate judgment. Interestingly, some insiders suggest that Meghan's alleged claims of sabotage were not intended to cause irreparable damage, but rather to assert control in a highly constrained environment. Being part of the royal family comes with strict rules, limited autonomy, and constant scrutiny. From this perspective, the accusations could be seen as an attempt to gain agency, albeit in a way that triggered conflict. For William, understanding these motivations was critical in crafting a response that balanced empathy, strategy, and the long-term stability of family relations. Yet, even with nuanced understanding, the potential fallout was immense. Sabotage implies deliberate harm. Deliberate harm in a royal context threatens relationships, institutions, and public trust. The perception of manipulation, whether true or imagined, can overshadow decades of goodwill, careful diplomacy, and ceremonial tradition. William had to navigate these dangers with precision, knowing that any misstep could exacerbate tensions and fuel the media firestorm already in progress. At this point, the palace reportedly became a tightly controlled environment. Conversations were monitored, events carefully coordinated, and communications meticulously managed. Every move, every word, every appearance became a calculated step in mitigating both real and perceived sabotage. William, at the center of it, had to maintain composure, make decisions under pressure, and anticipate the ripple effects of both private and public actions. The stakes extended beyond immediate family conflict. Allegations of sabotage can influence succession planning, internal hierarchies, and even international perception of the monarchy. William reportedly understood that handling these claims with care was not just about protecting reputations, but about safeguarding the continuity and credibility of the royal institution. So, let's pause and ask, how do you defend against allegations of sabotage when they come from someone you trust and when the world is watching? How do you balance empathy with accountability, perception with reality, and private resolution with public responsibility? These were the challenges William faced, and they would define the next stage of the unfolding drama. And just when it seemed that William's careful management might stabilize the situation, an unexpected leak, one that would shock the palace and the public alike, threatened to turn perception into reality, pushing the alleged sabotage claims into uncharted and explosive territory. The moment a private accusation crosses the palace walls and becomes public, control is lost. What started as Meghan Markle's private claims of sabotage quickly mutated into a tidal wave of leaks, rumors, and speculation, and for Prince William, it was the most dangerous part of the entire ordeal. The leaks didn't just threaten reputations, they threatened the narrative itself, twisting private conversations into public spectacle and leaving the royal family scrambling to respond. It began subtly. A quiet comment in an interview, a minor detail from a staff member, a photo that seemed innocuous but was interpreted as proof of tension. Each leak was a brushstroke in a larger, rapidly unfolding drama. Within days, what was once a private grievance became a global story, splashed across headlines, social media feeds, and television broadcasts. The palace had faced scrutiny before, but never like this. A story that combined allegations, public intrigue, and family loyalty in a combustible mix. William reportedly reacted immediately, gathering advisors and senior aides to assess the damage. Who was responsible for the leaks? How much of the story was true, partially true, or completely fabricated? And most importantly, how could the palace respond without escalating the crisis further? Every leak, no matter how small, had the potential to spiral out of control, and William understood that perception often mattered as much as reality in the court of public opinion. The leaks themselves were sophisticated. Some seemed orchestrated to make Meghan appear sympathetic, others to suggest internal family conflict. There were anonymous sources hinting at palace interference in her initiatives, subtle suggestions that she had been undermined at every turn, and carefully timed releases that coincided with her public appearances. It was a strategy that maximized attention and fueled speculation, whether intentional or not. What made the leaks especially dangerous was that they blurred the line between truth and interpretation. A minor disagreement, an administrative delay, or even a moment of private frustration could be interpreted as evidence supporting Meghan's claims. The palace, accustomed to managing information carefully, found itself on the defensive. Every public appearance became a risk, every statement a potential flashpoint. William, in particular, had to navigate this treacherous terrain, balancing family loyalty, institutional stability, and the inevitability of media scrutiny. Social media intensified the impact. Twitter threads, viral posts, and memes amplified rumors, often divorcing them from their original context. Public opinion became polarized. Some hailed Meghan as a truth-teller facing institutional pushback, others painted her as manipulative and opportunistic. These leaks transformed private tension into a global conversation, where nuance was lost and speculation reigned supreme. William's challenge was not just to manage his family's response. It was to contend with a worldwide audience hungry for drama, ready to assign blame, and quick to judge. Insiders suggest that William's approach combined patience with calculated action. He reportedly worked closely with advisors to verify information, cross-reference accounts, and identify the sources of leaks. Maintaining discretion was paramount, but action was necessary to prevent misinformation from spreading unchecked. Every conversation had to be carefully framed, every statement considered, and every public appearance orchestrated to minimize potential damage. The emotional toll was immense. For William, the leaks were not just a strategic problem, they were deeply personal. Accusations made in private had been amplified and distorted, creating narratives that questioned his family's integrity and loyalty. Reports suggest he experienced frustration, disappointment, and a profound sense of responsibility to protect both his family and the monarchy. Managing public perception while navigating internal family dynamics is a high-pressure scenario few can imagine, but it became his daily reality. The leaks also complicated relationships within the palace. Staff members, aides, and advisors became hyper-aware that any comment could be picked up, interpreted, and disseminated. Trust, already fragile, was tested constantly. William reportedly had to reassure team members while maintaining strict confidentiality, balancing transparency with the need to control sensitive information. Even minor slip-ups could fuel further speculation, adding layers of tension to an already fraught environment. One particularly volatile leak reportedly involved details of Meghan's private accusations. Whether intentional or accidental, it framed her claims in a way that suggested undeniable evidence of sabotage. Suddenly, the narrative was no longer about perception. It was presented as fact, putting William in a position where he had to defend his family against allegations appearing in the public domain, often without context. This escalation forced him to consider not only immediate responses, but long-term strategies for reputation management. The timing of leaks was critical. Strategic leaks coincided with media appearances, interviews, and even charitable events, maximizing their visibility and impact. Every release, intentional or inadvertent, had ripple effects, influencing public opinion and shaping the story before William or the palace could respond. This created a reactive environment where caution was necessary, but inaction risked letting misinformation take hold. Insiders indicate that William also faced the challenge of managing perceptions internationally. The global audience consumes royal news with fascination, often interpreting events through cultural or nationalistic lenses. A leak in London could spark outrage in New York, commentary in Sydney, and viral memes in Mumbai. The scope of influence magnified the consequences of every detail, adding urgency to William's already complex management strategy. Adding another layer of pressure was Harry's role. As Meghan's husband and William's brother, he became a key figure in both the leaks and the public discourse surrounding them. Every interaction between the brothers was analyzed, every meeting scrutinized. William reportedly had to navigate not just the leaks themselves, but their effect on familial bonds, public perception, and institutional stability. Tensions that were once private became fodder for international debate, forcing William to operate with unprecedented strategic foresight. The human dimension of the leaks cannot be overstated. Beyond strategy and reputation, they created an emotional battlefield. Accusations, even when unverified, carry psychological weight. The sense of betrayal, the frustration of being misrepresented, and the challenge of maintaining composure under relentless scrutiny. All of this added layers of pressure that extended far beyond palace walls. William had to maintain a careful equilibrium, managing both his personal emotions and his responsibilities as a royal leader. Interestingly, the leaks also revealed the fragility of private discourse in an era of digital media. Conversations meant to remain confidential were instantly at risk of public exposure, and the very architecture of modern communication made control nearly impossible. This is a dilemma familiar to anyone navigating high-profile life, but in the royal context, it was amplified exponentially. Every private word could become a public headline, every intention subject to interpretation. Despite the escalating chaos, William reportedly remained deliberate and strategic. He focused on verifying facts, maintaining communication channels, and preparing for possible public fallout. His approach illustrates the delicate balance between reacting to crises and controlling narratives, a balance that would define the next stages of the drama. And just when it seemed the leaks had pushed the family and institution to their limits, one particularly explosive revelation emerged, one that threatened to rewrite the story entirely, challenging assumptions, loyalties, and perceptions on a scale no one could have anticipated. Have you ever wondered what happens when the cameras are off, the public statements end, and the palace doors close behind you? This is where the real story unfolds, away from tabloids, social media, and global speculation. For Prince William, these private conversations were the crucible in which the drama surrounding Meghan Markle's allegations was being tested, reshaped, and, at times, intensified. According to insiders, William recognized early on that managing this crisis publicly was only half the battle. The real work happened behind closed doors, in discussions that were painstaking, delicate, and often emotionally charged. These conversations involved family members, advisors, staff, and, in some cases, Meghan and Harry themselves. Every word mattered. Every pause carried weight, and every decision could alter relationships and reputations forever. One key theme in these private exchanges was clarification. William reportedly sought to understand the specific nature of Meghan's accusations. What did she mean by sabotage? Which events did she feel were manipulated? Which interactions had caused the most distress? By dissecting the allegations in detail, William could separate perception from intent, emotion from fact, and misunderstanding from potential wrongdoing. Imagine the tension in those conversations. A member of your family claims deliberate interference in your life. They provide examples, cite events, and paint a narrative that implicates others you care about. The emotional stakes are immense. You have to remain composed, ask probing questions without being confrontational, and simultaneously protect your loved ones. This is the kind of mental and emotional gymnastics William reportedly had to perform constantly. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Harry, Meghan's husband, was often a central figure in these discussions. William had to navigate loyalty, trust, and sibling bonds, all while confronting claims that could strain relationships to the breaking point. How do you challenge an allegation made by someone close to your brother without causing a rift? How do you listen empathetically while assessing the truth? Every conversation required nuance, patience, and an almost surgical attention to emotional cues. Staff members, too, played a crucial role. They were often the silent witnesses, providing context, verifying timelines, and clarifying misunderstandings. But even staff interactions carried risk. One misinterpreted comment or poorly chosen phrase could be perceived as confirming allegations. William reportedly maintained strict protocols for internal communication, balancing transparency with discretion to prevent further complications.